from the United States to talk about these experiences, spoke yesterday with the theme, Never Again, Never Again. And I'm reminded in some of the reading that I've done, and in reading I might tell you some of the notes that were included by John Porteous in the official program. John wrote, I thought, very perceptively about matters to do with our propensity to slip back into bad habits. And that's the way certain parts of the population of this world treat others in their own countries. And I do recommend that you have another little look at that. It's John's, I call it John's Epistle to the Faithful. This is John Porteous's, and he writes in the program. So have a look at that again. It'll remind us of how susceptible we are, and we see that kind of inhumanity demonstrated in many parts of this world of ours today. It's appalling. But however, yesterday, Magda Brown used as her theme, Never Again, and she spoke of her incarceration and the maltreatment and those things that she endured as a child. Today she speaks about from slavery to freedom. So this is probably how it all becomes a little bit easier, but I'm not sure that it ever will be for this then young woman, now a lady with memories that she will take with her to her eternal reward. Magda Brown.
Good afternoon. I'm so pleased to see a full house, and for the sake of those who were not able to be with us yesterday, I would just like to, in a couple of sentences, recap what I talked about yesterday. I told my story of being imprisoned in the Nazi concentration camp of Auschwitz. I told my personal experiences from the time I left my home until I was liberated by the American Army. It was a treacherous 1 year in my young life. There were a couple of other things that I would like to recap, and that is, I summed it up in 5 words, and that was, I lost my home, I lost my valuables, lost my country, I became an orphan, a slave, and a displaced person without a future. Now, I believe I have said an awful lot in these few words, and what happens after you're liberated after all these tragedies? So, just to backstep, which I failed to say yesterday, and I want to emphasize, because I am addressing a group of a different faith who has the knowledge about the perish of the 6 million Jews. However, I want you to understand that through the Holocaust years, 11 million human beings perished. The 5 million others were Christians, people that Hitler did not like. And we were all labeled. It was bad enough that we wore prison uniforms. It was bad enough that we had our numbers tattooed on our arms. But the precision was so professional, and that's a very poor choice of words, but I don't know how else to tell you. I just want to describe to you how they labeled us. We all had a prison uniform on, and we had most of the people had a tattoo numbered on their arm. However, that wasn't enough. On the back of our uniform, there was a triangle painted, and this is how we were distinguished. If the triangle was painted green, that indicated that these were professional criminals who were incarcerated in the concentration camp. non-Jews, I'm not talking about Jews right now, if there was a black painting in the triangle that indicated that these were prisoners, Russian, Ukraine, Polish, and Gypsy background. If the triangle had a red painting, that showed that they were political opponents to the Reich. And they could be German people. And the pink was for the homosexuals, the violet was for the pacifists and the Jehovah's Witnesses. And of course, the yellow was the yellow Star of David for the Jews. So this gives you an idea how we were sorted and put in categories, like a piece of merchandise. Everything was methodically in order. So I purposely read this to you to give you the knowledge that so many non-Jewish people suffered because of this immense tragedy. And I also want to emphasize one thing about the comparison of genocide and Holocaust. Now, they are both immense tragedies, and the loss of life and the tragedies of the people through genocide is deep in my heart, and I have total compassion for the people who are undergoing these tragedies of today. But you see, the comparison between the Holocaust is something that can be described only this way. The Holocaust was a premeditated, scientifically organized mass killing. And this is more than fighting in a war and losing soldiers. It is more than occupying your country. It was people being killed for no other reason that they were the undesirable community. And these were itty-bitty babies and old people and young people, no difference. Their only sin was that they were born in the Jewish faith, or they had sufferings because of other political or other reasons. So with this in mind, I will go into my story of why I'm here today. You know, volumes have been written about the Holocaust. There are documentations, there are authentic photos, books, movies, anything you could possibly put your finger on to learn about that tragic history. However, there are not too many stories about how we recover. What happens when you are liberated? You have nothing on, just the clothes on your back, whatever you were liberated in, and you are starving hungry. So the first thing comes taking care of your body, meaning eating horribly, which meant that, for instance, a slice of bread would be this thick, the butter on it would be equally thick, the same size, and if that wasn't enough, you would pour some honey over it. We were so starved for sweet and carbohydrates and food. I don't tell you the story of the after effects, you know, but that was how starved we were for food. So we are liberated by the American Army, and through their channels, they make arrangements for us to remain in an area where we were liberated. I happened to be in a village, and they were dealing with the mayor of the town, who would see to it that we were housed in German homes. Now, can you imagine how we are feeling in those days to try to interact with people who have really been your enemy? And remarkably, what one-on-one interaction can do in human life, it is unbelievable. This is what you're doing here right now, so I don't have to go any further. In the beginning, the people are a little bit strange, you know. They They don't know how to act, but they give us a room in their home. And in my personal case, at that time I spoke German quite fluently. So I just started being me. My real personality was coming back. I was no longer that prisoner. I was beginning to be a human being again. So I saw this hostess of mine as a lady who is giving up her home so I can sleep there. Now remember, for a whole year we were sleeping in any conditions, and all of a sudden we were given a bed and we were given a sheet. I mean, you can't imagine, you know, this is our everyday life here now, but can you possibly imagine the luxury of all these little amenities? And slowly or surely we are interacting. We are interacting, and the anger is slowing down. You know, it's not an easy transition, but it is happening. So what do we do all day? Well, some of us were really very angry, and so, you know, it's understandable. And they would go into German houses that were left alone, you know, people escaped whatever they did, and they would start looking for stuff. Remember, we had nothing. These are young girls. Young girls want to be dressed up again. And I went only one time. I went into this home with the girls, and they were roaming around looking for stuff. And somehow or another, I ended up alone in the bedroom, and I opened up the linen closet, and I froze. I froze because those sheets were laid one on top of another, very neatly, very cleanly. And all of a sudden, I saw my mother's cupboard. I saw how my house was. And I could not take anything. So the only thing that I took from that house, in Europe it's customary to wear a little, like a little shawl when you comb your hair. So I saw that hanging on the door, and I said, okay, I'll take this. I have never, ever returned to any of this pilfering. It wasn't me. It wasn't my upbringing. I could not do it to the other people. So that was one of the steps of going forward. Life went on here. We were, of course, our first priorities were food. Food, food, food. I mean, we were really very emaciated looking and hungry, and so the total concentration went on food and survival. Food and clothing, and just living from day to day, really not knowing where we're heading, what we're gonna be. The emotional aspects were pushed aside, and they were pushed aside for the night. And then came the nightmares, and the nightmares were pretty bizarre. So it was very difficult to live with that. We were spending time in this German village, and one day a chaplain from the military interviewed us and was inquiring, what is your future? Do you want to go back to your hometown? Do you want to go to Palestine? People were going there in those days. And do you have any relatives around the world? So I remembered that my father had two brothers and a sister who emigrated to the United States in the early 1900s. Now, I knew only their name and the city. But you see, in those days, in the 1940s, everybody lived in the big city. The suburban communities were not happening. So, thanks to some very efficient volunteer, because this information was forwarded, and since many of you are volunteers, I thank all of you for what you're doing, because it's a most wonderful job to do. Anyhow, this volunteer found my uncles. Now, it was the biggest thing for them, because for years they have heard only the atrocities. They had no idea if anyone from their entire family is alive. So finally they got the news, and things got in, they started actions, and finally we were able to communicate. At the same time, during the summer, two Hungarian young men were combing the village because they have heard that these 1,000 Hungarian Jewish women are located in this general vicinity, and they were hoping that they could find some of their family members. Lo and behold, God is good, and I'll tell you this all day long and forever because I can prove it to you. Of the two men, one of them happened to be my brother's childhood boyfriend. Now, how much closer can you get? And I asked, do you know what's happening, anything? So with that, he turns to me and he said, I saw your brother at Christmas time in Budapest, 1944. Now, I have to explain to you that it's a meaningful date because by Christmas time, 1944, all the Jewish people have been taken out of the country except some in Budapest itself. So I thought that the whole world was moved away from home, and here he said he saw him. So needless to say, the excitement grew, and now I have to remind you of another very important thing here. There was no transportation. Trains were not established. There was no iPod. There was no cell phone. There was no email communication and all the marvelous things we have today. And things were pretty chaotic as far as transportation goes. But months after, the American Army decided that people who wished to go back to their homeland, they would give them service as far as a train ride. So I told my friends I was rooming with, I said, you know what, the few little rags that we have collected through all of your courtesy of sending gift packages, I said, you know what, even my stuff I'm going to leave right here in this little room. I'll go home and get my brother, pick him up and bring him back. Sounds very good. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. The train arrived on All Saints' Day, November 1st, into Hungary. With eager anticipation, I traveled to my hometown. And needless to say, the feeling is indescribable. And they had already, in the Jewish community, they had a headquarters where people were reporting in, because people were coming back from so many different areas, and they kept the list who returned and who never returned and so on. So I report to them, and they said that, well, we have sad news to tell you. Your brother was captured by the Russian army. And that was such a shock that I couldn't understand. I said, why would the Russians take him? Didn't he suffer enough under the Nazi ruling? So what has happened, when the Russian army was approaching Hungary from different areas of the east, the Hungarian military and the Nazis were fleeing the country towards Austria, get away from the Russians. His unit that he was in the military got stuck. The border was closed. So he remained with his entire compound, and the Russians captured the entire compound. They didn't care if you were a Nazi. They didn't care if you were a Hungarian soldier. They didn't care if you were a Jew. So what did they do? They took this entire regiment out to Archangels, which is the upper peninsula of Russia, and he was captured there for 3 years. The world was already free. People were reuniting, people were starting a new life, etc. And I know nothing about this. I only know that when I arrived in Hungary, I only know that he was captured by the Russians. There were no communications whatsoever. We tried to connect with the Red Cross, but they had no information. So now I am in Hungary, And the next day, in eager anticipation, I am anxious to go back to my home that I legally own. I go in the door, and I'm greeted by some people who were put into that house to live in by the government. And I said, could I have some space to sleep here until I decide what I'm going to do? And they refused. They did not give me a cot to sleep on, and it was a pretty large-sized house. It even had, like, they called it a summer kitchen, which is equivalent to a garage, and it was furnished with kitchen facilities and all that. I said, I'll stay in there. I mean, you know, I don't have to go inside. No, you cannot stay here. The government gave us this apartment, and this is ours. I had no legs to stand on. I had no money to start legal issues here. I mean, so cousins who came back, they have put me up. Now winter came, and I didn't know what to do. I'm altogether 18 years old, and I really, truly have to think for myself and make decisions myself, good or bad, but I am alone. There isn't a mother or a father to guide me. There isn't even a close friend that I could share my thoughts. So, good Lord is watching over me, and a visa affidavit arrives from the United States. Now, to describe the value of an American visa at that time cannot be weighed in gold. It was that valuable. Now here again, I am faced with decisions. What do I do? Do I remain here and wait until my brother returns, or take off? Meantime, winter is here, and I can't get out, and these cousins are nice enough to house me and feed me and take care of me. And come the spring, I said, well, he's not coming yet, and I think I will be better off if I go to the other part of the world and be free and see if I can bring him to join me. So with that in mind, through many Jewish agencies who were helping, we were helping one another, and they were able to transport me to the border town between Hungary and Austria. But you see, by that time, the Russians took full occupancy of the country, and at the same time, the Cold War between America and Hungary and Russia is already in action. So the borders are very, very secure. So it took us about 3 weeks at the border town to buy up some border guards who shipped us across during the night. And I ended up in Vienna, where they had a giant hospital that was converted to a transitory location, so we could stay somewhere. And after a while, I decided to go back to Germany, where I had my treasures. And the travel was something that you can't imagine. As I told you earlier, trains were really not running quite efficiently. People literally pushed me on the train, and for 12 hours between Vienna and Frankfurt, I stood on the top of a toilet in a little cubicle there, because that was the only space. But I made it to Frankfurt, I made it to the area where I was housed, and then I reported to the American consulate, and because my uncles were paying for my passage, it expedited things, plus I was young, so that also helped, which resulted in my arrival to the United States September of 1946. And here comes an interesting happening. I was, met again with volunteers and directed to the train to take the train from New York to Chicago. And the relatives are seated at the railroad station, and I walked by them. I have never seen them. I had no pictures of them. I didn't know who they were. Well, I was directed to go to the information area, and I walked by. They told me those are the people, so I go to them. And of course, the warm welcome is indescribable. I mean, they treated me like I was their own children, and anything and everything they could possibly shower me with, I received. Months later, my cousin revealed something to me. He said, you know, when you walked by, we kind of looked at you, but we figured, no, it couldn't be her. You see, I didn't look like the little refugee foreigner from an old third world country. I had my hair fixed, I had lipstick on, I had pretty shoes on, and I walked very confident with my purse on my shoulder, you know, as it was fashionable. So they figured it's one of the people here. Nevertheless, I was most welcome with them, and a lot of cute little things happened. A couple of weeks after I was there, a gentleman who came from my hometown pre-war heard about my being there, so naturally he wanted to come over and greet me and so on, which he did. And he came with a giant grocery bag of books, magazines, dictionary, newspapers, everything in Hungarian. So I said, thank you very much. And we put it down and we visited. The gentleman leaves, and my sturdy, very patriotic American aunt looks at me and she said, do you want to remain a Hungarian all your life? Or do you want to learn to speak English? So I really didn't know which direction to answer. I said, yes, Auntie, I would like to learn to speak English. Well, she took the grocery bag, in the trash can it went. I have never seen the contents of that stuff, but she did the right thing. Because weeks after, she sent me to English school, and that's how I'm able to communicate with you. So, and in those days, it was really quite important, and you really wanted to learn English. Nowadays, things are changing. You know, everything is multilingual. I appreciate that too, but I am kind of pro learning the language you're living in. And because, so anyhow, life went on. I made friends, and then came to employment. A wonderful Hungarian-born Jewish doctor befriended me. And he said, would you work in my office? I said, sure. I mean, I knew as much about being an office assistant as you know about Hungarian language. I said, okay. He said, I'll teach you everything. Don't worry about it. So he became my father. He became my mentor. He became my friend, my advisor. And we stayed together for 40 years. I worked in his office. In the subsequent years, I became certified, not certified in the English language, but I got some credentials, and we had a very harmonious relations. Now, the reason I mention this to you, to make you understand human kindness and connecting with people. At the very beginning, he pulled me aside and he said, you know, I want you to learn something in the medical profession. Yes. I have many wonderful patients who happen to be of German ancestry. I know how you're feeling. I know how hurt you are. But you have to remember, when you're working in a medical office, that person who walks through that door is a patient and nothing else but the most important person as a patient. So I want you to keep it in mind and try your best to curb your anger. And you know, I made more friends, life-lasting friends with these patients. To this day, I exchange Christmas cards with them. They call me, and we are the best of friends. So you see, hatred can turn into love. And that was an excellent healing for me, because I learned to look at people as people and not distinguishing their background. So now I tell you a little bit about love. A little more about love. I mean, let's be happy. I had the great fortune of meeting a Chicago-born, very nice Jewish boy. And now it was a culture shock because, you see, I thought I'd never marry a foreigner. I'll marry my own Hungarian kind. But he kept after me. And somehow or another, we connected and we got married. And it was very interesting because not only did I gain a husband, but I gained a magnificent family. Because his family welcomed me in like one of their own. And to this day, and he's gone already, but my brother-in-law and sister-in-law talk to me every week, and they live in another city. So, and my nephews from that part of the family. So it shows that love is just so very important. God blessed us with two wonderful children, and you had a chance to meet my daughter Rochelle, who is my better half here, and our son, who lives in California. And he blessed us with beautiful girls, and so did my daughter. So I have become a grandma and a great-grandma, and I'm kind of reliving my lost teen years with my grandchildren, and it is wonderful. And I want to throw in something to the young people. I want you to know that I'm a high-tech grandma. I Skype, I have email, I have a cell phone, I have a digital camera, and an iPod. So you see, you got to keep up with all of you guys, otherwise I couldn't talk to you. You're in a different language, a different orbit. But nevertheless, life went on with working, with raising a family. But you see, the readjustment wasn't as easy as it sounds here. I joined a new culture, I had to learn new things. Fortunately, I was able to keep my Jewish faith, which meant that I was observant. I kept a kosher house. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's Jewish dietary law where you don't mix meat and milk. And I have observed all the holidays. My children learned the Bible. So I try to forward some of the stuff that I have learned, and the God-fearing parents I had, that I was able to carry on their teachings. Life progressed, and I got involved with the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Educational Center. And this is a wonderful organization. This was comprised by Holocaust survivors who felt that there is a need for a museum. And we have a very, very meaningful slogan, which is, remember the past, but transform the future. And this is our aim. After all, I'm standing in front of you to tell my story. I appreciate you listening. But there is an important mission that I carry on. You see, the Holocaust is a history now. It's 65 years gone. Unfortunately, the millions of people who perished cannot come back and be with us. But there is your future, all the young people here. And if they learn something from these experiences, and they get some idea the importance of freedom, some idea of the importance of getting along with people, then I feel that I have accomplished my mission. And the good Lord has put me through a lot of ups and downs, but came through. You see, I was telling Monsignor yesterday that I have a direct line. I don't need a middleman. So I pray, he listens, we talk, it works. And here I am. I have the ultimate pleasure of visiting with you and enjoying your beautiful country and the hospitality beyond I have ever had. And then when I got involved with the museum, I just want to touch upon something important. What we are doing is, we have a speakers bureau, and some of us youngsters who are still having somewhat of a sane mind, where we can not repeat ourselves every minute, and physically able, we go out to schools, universities, churches. I did last year, I covered all religions. I've been to the First United Methodist Church. I did the Seventh-day Adventists in California, which was fabulous. They're all God-fearing people. And in addition, we go out to schools, middle schools, universities, wherever they want us. You see, there's something important in Illinois. It is the state in Chicago. And that is, it is mandatory to teach the Holocaust studies in conjunction with the history of the Second World War. So by this time of the year, because they usually reach this topic right after the Christmas break. So by the time they come to the Holocaust studies is now, and we are bombarded with invitations. Matter of fact, next week I am going to St. Teresa's Catholic School, and I have been invited to return 2 times already. So I made my grade with the nuns there. And so anyhow, the museum is, as I told you, transform the future. So how do we do that? First of all, we have the artifacts, you know, as a museum would have, all the past history, all the tragedies, photographs, testimonies, and so on. But on the other half of the museum, we have a magnificent, high-tech teaching facility for children. To teach children how to stand up to bullies, to teach children how to be brave, to teach children many aspects of protecting their freedom. And this is all done with the high-tech equipment. It is mind-boggling. And the children come as little as 5, 6 years old, and they play this game, and they have to answer, and they talk about it. So we feel that we are doing something for the future. Now, in conjunction with the museum, I have to tell you something very, very touching. And that deals with a group of German third-generation young people. So here I'm going to read you what they are. It's called, they are called ARSP, which means Action, Reconciliation, Service for Peace, which is a German peace organization which was founded in 1958 after World War II was over by members of the Confessing Church, which was a small resistance group during the Nazi era. The founders believed that Germans, even if not all of them were Nazis and collaborators, are responsible for the enormous suffering during World War II and the killing of 1 million Jews and 5 million other people. That is why they wanted to develop a process of reconciliation by sending volunteers to those countries which were attacked by Nazi Germany or where people suffered during the Nazi era. And today, ARSP sends every year 120 volunteers to about 15 different countries, and some of them go to Israel and some of them to the United States and different areas to help with Jewish museums, Jewish communities, and promote human rights and educational projects. So about 10 years ago, our museum heard about this, and they decided we are going to invite one of these volunteers and see what happens. Now, the way these children become volunteers is they complete high school, and then they are giving 1 year of their life for this project. And they come and they interact. Now you have to think very deep and imagine there is the old Holocaust survivor who is still carrying the torch, and there is this young German boy, and he is full of vitality and giving and love. How do they interact? It is the most remarkable human behavior you can't even imagine, because the reluctance gets tapered off and the two match like a cover on the pot. And there is such love and togetherness that develops, which comes to my story. Two young men became my adopted grandchildren. Now, would you believe? I mean, these are real German people. They have never seen Jewish people before they came here. As a matter of fact, both boys were attending in 2 different years my Passover evening services. Now, that was the greatest experience in their life because they just never seen anything like that. Nevertheless, they have become my family members. My children and grandchildren interact with them like they were cousins, you know, living in a different city. So, matter of fact, our grand opening for the new museum last year was about this time, and the museum directors decided that these 10 young men who served previously should be invited to the opening because they have contributed so much. So 2 of the young men were my house guests, and we Skype and we email, and he knows more about me being here than my own children because he is just fabulous. So why am I going at length telling you all this? Is that love conquers all. It is a human behavior, thank God for that we can overcome the hatred, we can overcome the animosity against one another, and just be people, one-on-one. So I think I told you a lot about many different things, except maybe I had just one more. About at the end of 1980s, a professor at the University of Marburg decided to give his students a paper to write about the activities of the munition factory, how it was built, etc., etc. And checking through records, they found a lot of documents about us. So much so that they found an authentic shipping list. We were shipped, 1,000 of us, from Auschwitz to this location, and this list is so neat. It tells you your prison number, your name, your married name, maiden name, place you were born, date of your birth, and your occupation. And it was stamped on at Auschwitz, and it was stamped on August 1944, so it's as authentic as one can be. So once they found this document, they started searching for us, and in Hungary they found many of the ladies from this group, got in touch, which resulted in a reunion. Now, can you possibly imagine returning to the place of your horror under modern condition? And in the beginning, when we got the invitation, most of us were kind of reluctant. Should we? Should we not? Do we want to stir up old pain? Then my husband advised me. He said, you should go. You should show your presence. You should be proud of how far you have gotten. Okay, the time arrived, and we were welcomed by a group of church ladies par excellence. That's all I can tell you. They couldn't have more. Now, these church ladies were already second-generation residents, and their remarks were that we hope that you're leaving our home now will leave you a different memory compared to what you left the first time. So we were treated, and this gathering resulted in a creation of a museum about us. So what they have done, they took this list of 1,000, they blew it up, and it has become the wallpaper in the museum. And you could point at your name, which I went to the opening, and one of our members is an artist, and she made the most impressive bronze statue of our existence. There are two women. One is standing up with her hands up in a hope and a dove, and the other one is bent forward carrying the bomb. And it is the most impressive piece of artwork, and they placed it right at the entrance of the museum. So this is how one recovers and joins society. I want you to know that I will never forget. I don't want to forget, because I have to live with the memories that I had. But at the same time, life goes on and we have to go forward. And at this time, I really sincerely would like to thank John and Bill and Palmer Doyle and Mrs. Jean Simmons for extending their most gracious welcome, and to all of you for sitting through and listening to my story. Thank you so much. Thank you.